In the long and often tense history of Cambodia-Thailand relations, few places have carried as much symbolic and strategic weight as the rugged borderlands near the Preah Vihear temple. By mid-2025, a fragile peace was still holding after years of intermittent disputes. Yet beneath the surface, mistrust simmered. Decades-old grievances, national pride, and unresolved territorial disagreements kept the region on edge. In July 2025, this tension erupted into one of the most serious confrontations in recent years. According to Cambodian accounts, the spark came in the early hours, when Thai troops allegedly crossed into Cambodian territory near contested sectors adjacent to the Preah Vihear complex, erecting barbed wire and defensive barriers. Thai officials countered with their own accusations, claiming Cambodian units had positioned themselves aggressively and fired the first warning shots. But whatever the claim, the result was the same: a volatile standoff that would escalate into heavy clashes before the month was over. This is the story of that escalation, the first phase of a conflict that began with patrol movements and diplomatic protests, but quickly grew into a dangerous exchange of fire. Part 1. From border patrols to armed clashes. The first signs of trouble appeared in the first week of July 2025. Local villagers in Cambodia's Preah Vihear province began reporting increased military presence along rural tracks leading to the frontier. Farmers claimed to have seen new Thai outposts being set up within sight of Cambodian positions. These early movements were initially treated with caution in Phnom Penh. Border patrol adjustments are not unusual, especially during the rainy season when terrain shifts and pathways alter. But as reports grew more frequent, the tone in Cambodian military briefings changed. On the morning of July 10th, Cambodian border guards stationed east of Phnom Trop observed Thai engineering units unloading rolls of barbed wire. Within hours, a defensive barrier had been laid in an area Phnom Penh considered part of its sovereign territory. The wire line was not just a symbolic marker, it blocked a known supply path used by local communities to move goods between villages. Cambodian officers confronted their Thai counterparts, demanding its removal. The meeting was tense but ended without gunfire. Still, both sides radioed for reinforcements. By the next day, larger units had arrived. On the Cambodian side, lightly armed infantry, supported by mortar, took positions near a small pagoda that had served as a community gathering point. On the Thai side, soldiers occupied elevated ground overlooking the barbed wire zone, giving them a tactical advantage. Neither side withdrew. Over the following days, negotiations through local commanders continued but made little progress. Both militaries issued public statements, framing themselves as the defender, not the aggressor. Phnom Penh accused Bangkok of calculated provocation, pointing to the construction of defensive lines as proof of an intention to alter the status quo by force. Bangkok accused Phnom Penh of staging armed patrols into sensitive areas, framing it as a breach of trust and a direct challenge to Thai sovereignty. By mid-July, the situation grew more dangerous. Civilians began to leave the immediate border zone, fearing that the verbal clashes would soon turn into armed ones. Local schools shut down, and religious leaders urged restraint, recalling the casualties suffered in previous confrontations. The first shots, the turning point, came in the late afternoon of July 17th. According to Cambodian military reports, Thai troops opened fire first. Short bursts of automatic gunfire, directed at Cambodian observation posts near Prasat Tamon Thom. Cambodian forces responded immediately, and within minutes, the entire sector was engulfed in the sound of gunfire. Thai accounts reversed the sequence, alleging that Cambodian soldiers had fired warning shots at a Thai patrol attempting to check damage to one of their forward posts after heavy rain. The fighting was brief but intense, lasting less than an hour before both sides pulled back slightly to regroup. However, the exchange shattered any lingering hope of a peaceful resolution without higher-level intervention. Escalation along the frontier. In the days that followed, clashes broke out at multiple points along the border. including Prasat Tamon Toch and the slopes of the so-called Ghost Mountain. These were not random skirmishes. Both sides appeared to be testing each other's resolve. Cambodian commanders accused Thai forces of using drone surveillance to coordinate artillery fire, while Thailand accused Cambodia of deliberately placing heavy weapons within civilian zones to complicate countermeasures. The conflict began to draw in heavier weaponry. By July 20th, Cambodian positions were reportedly targeted by Thai mortar fire. Cambodian artillery units responded, sending shells toward Thai forward operating bases. Each strike brought new risks for nearby villagers, who now faced the threat of both stray rounds and the collapse of already fragile homes. The air factor. The most alarming development came on July 23rd. Cambodian defense officials claimed that Thai F-16 fighter jets had entered Cambodian airspace, dropping munitions near a rural school and a Buddhist pagoda in Preah Vihear province. The attack allegedly left multiple civilians injured, prompting immediate condemnation from Phnom Penh. Thailand denied intentionally striking civilian structures, insisting that all air operations were defensive and aimed only at Cambodian military targets. This incident hardened Cambodian resolve and drew sharp warnings from the United Nations, which urged both sides to halt hostilities. The UN Security Council issued a statement expressing deep concern over the risk of full-scale war, especially in such a historically sensitive area. Life on the ground. For those living along the border, daily life became a struggle for survival. Villagers fled to temporary camps farther inland, leaving behind homes, livestock, and livelihoods. Humanitarian agencies began preparing emergency relief shipments, although access to certain areas was complicated by ongoing skirmishes. Local monks in Preah Vihear took in dozens of displaced families, turning temple courtyards into makeshift shelters. Food supplies quickly ran low, and donations had to be brought in under military escort. Even within these shelters, the sound of distant gunfire and occasional air sorties kept residents in a state of constant anxiety. Diplomatic maneuvers. At the diplomatic level, the crisis dominated regional news. ASEAN officials attempted to mediate, proposing an immediate ceasefire and the establishment of a joint monitoring team. Cambodia agreed in principle, but insisted that Thai forces withdraw from the areas where barbed wire had been laid. Thailand agreed to review its positions, but refused to acknowledge any violation of Cambodian sovereignty. Tensions were further inflamed by media coverage in both countries. Cambodian broadcasts emphasized civilian suffering and portrayed Thailand as the aggressor, while Thai media focused on alleged Cambodian provocations and the need to defend national borders. The narrative divide made compromise harder to achieve. The run-up to the ceasefire talks. By July 26th, the border region was under near constant military watch. Armored vehicles were seen moving closer to the front lines, and both sides dug new trenches. Reports surfaced of chemical irritants allegedly used in evening assaults, a claim Cambodia leveled against Thailand, accusing its forces of delivering airborne agents to flush Cambodian troops from entrenched positions. Thailand rejected the allegation as fabricated propaganda. Despite the escalation, there were also behind-the-scenes efforts to prevent further bloodshed. Intelligence channels between the two militaries remained open, allowing limited coordination to evacuate wounded soldiers from no man's land. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, quietly facilitated prisoner exchanges for soldiers captured during early Part 2, Escalation, Retaliation, and the Road to Ceasefire. The first hours after the Thai incursion into Cambodian territory on the morning of the 24th of July 2025 marked a turning point in the simmering tensions. Along the disputed border near the ancient temple zones and adjacent military posts, by midday the initial firefight at the barbed wire line outside Preah Vihear had spread east and west, pulling in additional Cambodian border posts at Phnom Trop, Prasat Tamon Thom, Prasat Tamon Toch, and the contested high ground known as Ghost Mountain. Witness accounts describe the engagement as fierce, chaotic, and unrelenting. Cambodian officers later alleged that Thai forces had crossed well beyond their own military line, setting up forward firing positions in areas under Cambodian administration since the last international court ruling. By the evening of the 24th of July, the fighting had intensified. Small arms exchanges escalated into the use of mortar, heavy machine guns, and artillery. Cambodian field commanders reported that the Thai side was employing coordinated fire from multiple positions, a sign, they argued, of a premeditated offensive. The Thai government countered with its own statement, accusing Cambodian units of initiating the hostilities by firing first on a Thai patrol, claiming that their troops had entered the zone only to remove illegally placed Cambodian defensive wire and observation posts. The contradiction between these narratives deepened distrust and inflamed public sentiment in both countries. The next day, the 25th of July, brought a deadly escalation. Cambodian radar operators reported fast-moving contacts over the disputed zone just after sunrise. Within minutes, the roar of jet engines cut across the sky. Thai F-16 fighters streaked in low over the hills, releasing precision-guided munitions against what Thai authorities later claimed were Cambodian artillery positions, shelling their troops. Cambodian sources, however, stated that at least 2 of the bombs struck well beyond the combat zone, one demolishing a small primary school on the Cambodian side of the border and another hitting the compound of a Buddhist pagoda in a nearby village. The human cost was immediate and harrowing. The school was empty at the time due to the summer break, but the pagoda compound was sheltering several dozen civilians displaced from earlier clashes. Cambodian emergency workers described scenes of panic as smoke, debris, and dust filled the air. Several monks were wounded, and one elderly villager died from shrapnel injuries. Images captured by local journalists circulated rapidly online, sparking outrage across Cambodia and calls for an emergency response from Phnom Penh. In the afternoon of the 25th of July, Cambodian artillery retaliated against Thai positions across the ridge lines. The exchanges were now continuous, a rolling thunder of explosions audible for kilometers. Thai commanders reinforced their frontline units with additional troops and armored vehicles. Cambodian forces also received reinforcements from inland garrisons, moving under the cover of night to avoid detection from Thai air patrols. By the 26th of July, the fighting had settled into a brutal pattern. Daylight hours saw sporadic but intense artillery duels, sniper fire, and occasional infantry pushes toward contested points, while nightfall brought infiltration attempts and sudden bursts of close-range combat. The area around Ghost Mountain was particularly bloody, with both sides determined to hold the high ground. Cambodian soldiers claimed that Thai units had used gas or chemical irritants delivered by drones or low-flying aircraft in the late evening, forcing them to temporarily abandon one defensive line. Thai officials denied the allegation, calling it fabricated propaganda. Throughout the 26th, the civilian toll mounted the nearby Cambodian villages of Svay Krum and Phnom Trop were hit by stray rounds and mortar shells, forcing hundreds to flee to makeshift shelters further inland. Aid groups struggled to reach the area due to the intensity of the fighting. Field hospitals were set up in school buildings far from the front lines, treating both military and civilian casualties. Cambodian doctors reported cases of respiratory distress among some soldiers and villagers, which they suspected could be linked to airborne irritants used in the combat zone. On the diplomatic front, international reaction began to intensify. The United Nations issued a statement urging both sides to halt the fighting immediately and return to dialogue. Several ASEAN member states expressed concern that the conflict could spiral out of control, undermining regional stability. Behind closed doors, diplomats from neutral countries tried to broker a cooling-off period, but neither side appeared ready to concede ground. On the 27th of July, the fighting reached its peak. Cambodian reconnaissance units detected renewed Thai troop concentrations near Phnom Trop and Prasat Tamon Thom, accompanied by armored support. Just before midday, Heavy exchanges erupted along the entire contested sector, suggesting a coordinated Thai push. Cambodian gunners opened up with sustained artillery fire to blunt the advance. Thai F-16s returned to the skies, this time targeting what they claimed were Cambodian active firing sites. But again, Cambodian sources reported civilian damage, including the destruction of 2 houses and injuries to several farmers tending fields just outside the battle zone. As dusk fell on the 27th, both armies were locked in stalemate. The cost in lives and infrastructure was mounting, and the prospect of further escalation loomed large. Phnom Penh made an urgent appeal to the UN Security Council, accusing Thailand of a calculated campaign of territorial violation and civilian targeting. Bangkok issued its own protest, blaming Cambodia for reckless aggression and warning that its armed forces would respond with full force to any further attacks. Late on the night of the 27th of July, diplomatic pressure reached a critical point. Representatives from multiple ASEAN nations, backed by UN envoys, shuttled between the 2 capitals with a draft ceasefire agreement. After intense negotiations stretching into the early hours, both sides reluctantly agreed to halt hostilities at exactly 0 o'clock on the 29th of July 2025. The agreement included provisions for the withdrawal of troops to pre-clash positions, the dismantling of newly erected barbed wire and fortifications, and the arrival of neutral observers to monitor compliance. The 28th of July was tense but significant. Throughout the day, sporadic skirmishes still flared, sometimes the result of miscommunication, sometimes perhaps deliberate shows of force by commanders unwilling to appear weak. Cambodian and Thai artillery units exchanged several final bursts of fire in the morning, and sniper shots cracked across the no man's land near Ghost Mountain in the afternoon. But as the sun set, a noticeable quiet began to settle over the battlefield. In the final hours before the ceasefire, both armies retrieved their wounded and dead from exposed positions. Ambulances and military trucks shuttled back and forth under temporary truces arranged by local commanders. Fires still burned in some damaged villages, and the smell of smoke and gunpowder lingered in the humid night air. Soldiers on both sides knew that once the clock struck midnight, the guns would fall silent, at least officially. At 0 o'clock on the 29th of July, the ceasefire took effect. Observers reported that the lines went quiet almost immediately. There were no artillery blasts, no bursts of automatic gunfire, no explosions. The border zone lay in eerie stillness, broken only by the sound of crickets and the occasional bark of a distant dog. For the first time in nearly 5 days, the night sky was free of the flare bursts and tracer rounds that had lit it in streaks of red and white. The aftermath of the clashes would be long and complicated. Both countries emerged from the week's events with deep grievances and hardened positions. Cambodia insisted that the Thai incursion had been unprovoked, and that the airstrikes against the school and pagoda were clear violations of international law. Thailand maintained that it had acted in self-defense and that its military actions had been justified. Responses to Cambodian aggression. The truth, as always in such conflicts, was contested, with each side clinging to its version of events. For the civilians living along the border, however, the political arguments mattered little compared to the reality they had endured. Days of fear, displacement, loss, and uncertainty. Aid convoys began arriving on the 29th of July, carrying food, medical supplies, and tarpaulins for temporary shelter. Engineers worked to restore damaged roads and power lines. Monks returned to the ruined pagoda, beginning the slow process of cleaning and rebuilding. Even in the uneasy calm after the ceasefire, both Cambodian and Thai soldiers remained on alert. Patrols along the demarcation lines were doubled, observation posts reinforced, while the official agreement called for a withdrawal to pre-clash positions. The trust between the two militaries was so low that neither side seemed eager to pull back entirely. International monitors arriving on the 30th of July found the atmosphere tense, with soldiers from both nations watching each other warily through binoculars. The events of the 24th to the 28th of July 2025 would leave a lasting mark on Cambodian-Thai relations. Though the ceasefire held in the immediate weeks that followed, the underlying dispute over territory and historical claims remained unresolved. Analysts warned that without a durable political settlement, the border could once again ignite into open conflict. For now, however, the guns were silent, and for the people who had lived in the shadow of the clashes, that silence was the most precious thing of all. Part 3: The Final Push and the Road to Ceasefire. As July 2025 entered its final days, the situation along the Cambodia-Thailand border remained deeply tense, even as diplomatic channels pushed frantically for an end to hostilities. The events of July 27th had been among the most intense of the entire clash. Cambodian and Thai forces had continued exchanging fire in key flashpoints: Phnom Trop, Prasat Tamon Thom, Prasat Tamon Toch, and areas around Ghost Mountain, each side accusing the other of being the aggressor. While international observers demanded restraint, the conflict on the ground showed no signs of easing. For Cambodia, the stakes were high. The territory in dispute lay not only within recognized Cambodian borders, according to international court rulings, but also carried heavy historical and cultural weight. Preah Vihear Temple and the surrounding zones were more than just strategic military positions. They were sacred heritage. For Thailand, nationalist sentiment was running equally high. Many in Bangkok viewed the disputed map lines as the result of unfair colonial-era agreements and argued that their military presence was a defensive measure. By this stage, the fighting had evolved beyond sporadic skirmishes. Cambodian forces, still reeling from earlier incidents involving Thai F-16 airstrikes on civilian structures, including the school and pagoda that had been destroyed on July 25th, were now entrenched, determined not to give an inch. Thailand's military maintained its position that these strikes had targeted only military supply points, but ground-level witnesses and footage painted a different picture. Shattered classrooms, burning monastery roofs, and civilians fleeing with their belongings clutched to their chests. July 27th, the War of Accusations. The morning of July 27th began with Thai media reports claiming Cambodian troops had attempted a provocative push into Thai territory near Tamon Thom. Cambodia swiftly rejected the claim, stating that their troops were on defensive patrol within Cambodian borders. When Thai soldiers advanced with barbed wire and heavy machine gun positions, the firefight that erupted lasted more than 2 hours, with artillery shells whistling across the ridgelines. The battlefield itself was a chaotic mix of smoke, dust, and the deafening crack of weapons fire. Cambodian soldiers held their positions in fortified bunkers, while Thai infantry attempted to flank through the tree lines. Both sides reported casualties, but exact numbers were hard to verify due to the overlapping claims. Adding to the tension, Cambodian military intelligence accused Thailand of using aerial dispersal of chemical irritants, a claim that immediately drew sharp condemnation from human rights observers. Thailand denied any such use, stating that their Air Force sorties were limited to reconnaissance and surgical strikes against what they described as Cambodian artillery nests. The psychological battlefield. The conflict was no longer just about territory. It had become a psychological war. In Phnom Penh, crowds gathered outside government buildings holding Cambodian flags, chanting for the army to defend every inch of the land. In Bangkok, rallies formed urging the Thai government not to bow to international pressure. The rhetoric on both sides hardened. Cambodian state television aired footage of the bombed school, showing blackened walls and broken desks, with narration describing it as proof of Thai aggression. Meanwhile, Thai media outlets focused on interviews with Thai villagers evacuated from the border, describing alleged Cambodian artillery fire landing near their homes. Social media amplified every image, every accusation, and every video clip. Drones captured close-up shots of the conflict lines, and in many cases, the same clip would be used by both sides to tell opposing stories. One claiming it showed defensive bravery, the other calling it an unprovoked attack. July 28th, the ceasefire deadline. As the bloodshed threatened to spiral out of control, urgent talks were brokered through a combination of ASEAN mediation and direct UN involvement. The United Nations Security Council had already warned that any further escalation could destabilize the entire Southeast Asian region. On the morning of July 28th, after marathon overnight negotiations, a tentative ceasefire agreement was reached. Both sides agreed to halt all offensive operations as of 00:00 midnight on July 29, 2025, and to allow international observers to monitor the withdrawal of heavy weaponry from the disputed zones. The hours leading up to the ceasefire, however, were anything but peaceful. Fierce clashes continued well into the late afternoon of July 28th, as each side tried to secure advantageous positions before the guns went silent. Cambodian forces reported 2 additional Thai air sorties during this period, which they claimed were deliberate attempts to damage their forward artillery. Thai officials countered that these were defensive measures to stop Cambodian mortar teams from firing on Thai border posts. The last hours of fighting, from late evening on July 28th until the stroke of midnight, both armies engaged in what many soldiers later described as the loudest night of the war. Artillery thundered through the darkness. Tracer rounds arced across the night sky. At Phnom Trop, a final firefight broke out just before midnight, leaving several wounded on both sides. Yet, at precisely 00:00 on July 29th, the gunfire fell silent, not because trust had suddenly been restored, but because orders had come down to stand down. Soldiers on both sides of the barbed wire stood tense, their hands still gripping rifles, unsure if the other side would honor the ceasefire. But gradually, the silence held. The smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air, and the cries of the wounded still echoed. But for the first time in weeks, the border was still. Post-ceasefire realities. By dawn on July 29th, the first international observers arrived at key flashpoints, documenting damage and verifying troop positions. The scale of destruction was staggering. Burned-out vehicles, collapsed bunkers, shattered pagoda statues, and pockmarked school walls. Cambodian villagers in the vicinity bore the scars of the airstrikes, while Thai forward positions showed the impact of sustained Cambodian artillery fire. The political battle, however, was far from over. Both Phnom Penh and Bangkok claimed victory in defending their sovereignty. Both accused the other of having been the true aggressor. The question of who fired first in the initial skirmish of mid-July remained bitterly disputed. For ordinary people living along the border, the cost was far more tangible. Families mourned lost relatives, farmers returned to fields littered with shell fragments, and children tried to resume classes in temporary tents erected near their destroyed schools. The closing statement, the July 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border clash, was a painful reminder of how historical disputes, when left unresolved, can erupt with devastating speed. The fighting at Phnom Trop, Prasat Tamon Thom, Prasat Tamon Toch, Ghost Mountain, and the symbolic backdrop of Preah Vihear underscored the deep emotional and strategic weight of the contested territory. While the ceasefire of July 29th stopped the immediate bloodshed, it did not resolve the underlying tensions. In both countries, nationalist voices continued to call for uncompromising positions. Diplomats faced the monumental task of transforming a fragile truce into lasting peace. The events remain etched into the memories of those who lived through them, the soldiers who fought, the civilians who fled, the monks who saw their sacred temples scarred by shrapnel. And for the wider world, it stood as a cautionary tale. When borders become battlefields, the true cost is always borne by the people.